hearty welcome, everybody, to the very first virtual hotel club. And thank you for attending this event, which, as you know, is being hosted by HTI Consulting and our sponsors, SVA, Hilton International, and Profica Professional Project Management. HTI Consulting are taking advantage of this technology to expand the hotel club beyond South Africa's borders and align the event with our Pan-African focus. So the point of this event is to interact, share knowledge and experiences, and create business opportunities. So we hope that you enjoy our very first virtual event, and thank you once again for joining us. Please send us feedback after the event. We want this to be a regular a gathering for hospitality professionals and participants, and we want to improve the event as we go along. So please let us know your thoughts. We are currently being watched by 115 people. It's going up very fast. So I will now hand you over to Wayne, who will start his presentation. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Hotel Club regulars and others. It's great to see that we've got such a good turnout of around about, we had 250 registrations. Currently, we have around about 113 people. So it's great to see. I'm going to try and keep the presentation short because the main purpose of Hotel Club is for networking and to try and generate deals and leads and opportunities. And I think now we're entering the stage of opening up businesses, which is great and encouraging. And because of that, I think we wanted to focus on a presentation that looked at trying to bring some of the positives and not focus on areas that people have already researched and spoken about in other webinars. So we're looking at the development pipeline and looking at the projects that were signed by operators prior to COVID, and looking at what is the stage of these projects and what is the general sentiment amongst owners. So just an introduction first to HTI Consulting. HTI Consulting, and looking at, then we're going to have a look at the regional update on COVID. After that, we'll have a look at the overall development update, which is based on a survey that we looked at with all the international and regional operators. And then we're going to look regionally at the pipeline and try and unpack that, looking at East, West, and Southern Africa, and then some closing remarks, which will lead us into then the moderated sessions. So just in terms of HTI Consulting, is a full-service hospitality advisory consulting firm. And basically we focused on 45 countries in Africa, and we have a dedicated team of 9 hotel experts and support staff. And we have 2 offices, one office in Cape Town and one office in Mauritius. We've worked on more than 450 assignments in 45 countries over the last 17 years that we've been in operation. We've worked, the kind of work that we do, we work on feasibility studies, valuations, operator selection, and brokerage services. Just some of the key projects that we've worked on. We've worked on the Pullman in Accra and Ghana. We worked there on feasibility updates as well as management contract assistance. We've also worked on in Zambia some of these key projects, the Sarawak Premier, 100 key business hotel in Lusaka, the Hilton Garden Inn in Swaziland, which was, I think, which is quite a landmark deal from a Swaziland perspective. Then looking at Cape Town, we've done the Radisson Red, the feasibility study and operator selection on that, which was again the first Radisson Red in Africa. And then we worked on the first 5 Marriott hotels on feasibilities and operator and management contract negotiation. The 2 in Melrose Arch, Marriott and executive residences, and 2 in Cape Town, as well as the AC by Marriott. So just to put things in context, just from a COVID perspective, if we have a look at it's interesting to look at the numbers from an Africa perspective, based on reported cases. There's only around 383,000 reported cases, of which 9,691 deaths. If we compare this to the world data of 4.2 million and 519,000 deaths, and also the US data of 2.6 million and 177,000 deaths, see that Africa is still sort of way behind in terms of numbers, whether that's due to testing or reporting. But if numbers are true, then we entered the virus at a later stage, later than other countries, and I think with that we're probably going to find that might mean that we'll have the virus a little bit longer than others. So I think the key thing to learn from this is that we're going to be in this for a while, and hence we all need to plan and look forward. So just looking at some of the things that have happened during COVID in terms of some of the hotels, there's been some closures, there's been some announcements by Casada Capital in terms of investment, in terms of purchases in Kenya, as well as some closures of the Dusit D2 and a couple other hotels. So if we look at the overall development update during lockdown, I think we looked at a survey we surveyed most of the international and regional operators, of which we got 14 responded and filled in the questionnaires. And basically, just to put that in context, this covers around about 41 brands under development. These are not just the brands that are represented by the owners, but the actual brands in terms of the pipeline. And this covers 219 projects. And when we talk about pipeline, we're talking about which signed management contracts. And these were signed before COVID. And in the next slides, we will show you how we unpack that in terms of different categorizations. So we'd just like to thank everybody else, all the operators that contributed to the survey. And I think it's got quite a strong representation of the projects that are actually in the pipeline at the moment. So the data should be fairly meaningful coming out of it. So if we have a look at, on the left, we're looking at all the planned supply. And then on the right, we're looking at breaking this down by supply actually under construction. So out of those 219 projects, 45% of those are in the planning phase and 54% are physically under construction. So if we're looking at the planned supply, 68% of the planned supply is proceeding. Is proceeding, whereas only 18% is on hold for a limited period, and 13% are sort of uncertain in terms of whether it's going to be on hold indefinitely. And supply under construction, interesting to note, is that 75% of supply under construction is proceeding. So I think that's to be expected that figure is higher than the planned supply, because a lot of that construction is difficult to stop in terms of construction, but some of them are pausing it. 18% have paused it for a limited period, whilst only 7% of hotels under construction are on hold indefinitely. So if we look at what the operators are saying, opening and construction delays, if we look at the opening delays, this is on all projects. So this covers not just the ones under construction, so it's the planning and construction projects. 40% say that there's no change to the date, to delivery date at this stage. And 26% are saying there's a delay of 3 to 6 months, which is to be expected, which is what most people seem to be looking at as the impact of what COVID is happening. And then to a lesser extent, 8% and 14% of 9 to 12 months and 12 months greater than 12 months. Looking from a construction perspective, the delivery date, so this is actually relating to delivery date in terms of opening of the hotels. Only 30% believe that there's not going to be any delay, whereas 37% will be delayed between 3 to 6 months, and 18% between 6 and 9 months. So this is all very encouraging, and it's, I mean, I think one thing to bear in mind is the information that we've got is obviously from the operators, but the operators have been in contact with their owners on all their projects. So we hope that it is a representation, a fair representation of also what the owners are saying. You know, I mean, that's something that we can unpack when we come into the moderated sessions further down the line. So we look at overall development during lockdown. Here we're looking at in terms of which hotels are going to open in still this year. 52% say that these have been delayed by 3 to 6 months. But encouragingly, 21 projects are still scheduled to open this year in Africa, which represents 2,946 hotel rooms. And that's extremely encouraging, considering that you know, that COVID started in sort of March, and we're still sitting with it now in June, July, and these hotels are still expected to open during this period and proceed forward. In terms of what we're looking at the owners' sentiment. 57% of current owners haven't changed their sentiment towards the hospitality industry, and still are looking at a medium to long-term view. So this is extremely encouraging. If we look at the hospitality sector, is probably one of the most impacted sectors of all from a COVID perspective, hospitality and airline sector. And I think some would expect the sentiment across the sector to have changed considerably in terms of looking at this impact and the volatility of an event of such case. But it's encouraging to see that that owners are not looking at a short-term basis. They do look at it. This is a short-term impact and looking at the long-term investment horizon. But there still are concerns in terms of around the travel bans and when these will be lifted. And it's also in terms of how to restore guest confidence. One of the key things obviously is going to be hygiene and safety protocols, as well as communication with guests and keeping them well informed, and how to handle sort of situations that the hotels might find themselves in. And how will some of the other key concerns from the owner's perspective, how is COVID going to impact on hotel valuations? And in terms of, you know, what the sentiment is going to be from a banking perspective. It'll be great to hear later on if we have some banks in the sessions if they could contribute and just let us know what the general sentiment is. But based on the discussions that we've been having with banks, it seems that they've put in place in terms of mechanisms for owners on existing hotels to ensure that they're sustainable through this period by giving them sort of you know, interest holidays, and are trying to, you know, work with the owners and ride this out. But and in terms of focusing on that first before looking at new developments. One thing we thought we'd also ask the operators is, you know, have they, you know, what activity, what have you managed to achieve during this the last 2 or 3 months from March through to June? And encouragingly, you know, despite the challenges and despite most countries being in lockdown for 2 to 3 months and people working from home and workforces being impacted, hotel management companies have still managed to sign, based on the ones that we surveyed, 15 new hotel deals covering 7, these are 7 operators and covering 8 African countries. So this is extremely positive, and considering that, you know, the signings, that some of these were at advanced stages before March this year, and that the owners were willing to carry on and proceed forward. So looking at the overall development sentiment, what we asked the operators to do is also just let us know, you know, what kind of things they're doing during this period, how they're doing things differently, how you're adapting to the situation. So obviously a lot of contract negotiations are happening via Zoom. We've actually been involved in a couple of them, and it's actually, you can get quite effective in terms of it. It can actually, I think, can speed up the process by not having to travel. And that seems to be working, streamlining, accelerating internal approval processes. I believe A number of the operators have done this so that they can actually fast track some of these projects during development and in terms of signing and approvals. And there's also more flexibility around their brands. Some have been also flexible in terms of fee structures. Others are looking at ways in which their brands can adapt and looking at possibly even launching brands to take advantage or to adapt to the current situations. We're seeing more conversions apparent, which is to be expected, considering also that you probably find that a lot of some of the most impacted hotels might be those that are sort of independent and might look at other opportunities to be able to enter the market, re-enter the market quicker by looking at branding opportunities. And if we look at the regional pipeline, I think these are the things that we're going to unpack later on in the sessions. The overall pipeline, we're looking at 219 branded hotels, as we mentioned, with 33,000 hotel rooms. A large proportion of those are in West Africa, which we've seen as well. A lot of new projects are entering the market in Francophone, and other markets like Nigeria and Ghana are seeing a lot of sort of development in the pipeline. In East Africa is the next largest in terms of new development pipeline. There's been a lot of hotels that have entered the market in East Africa, but this, as being one of the highest growth regions, it hasn't deterred any new entrants. In Southern Africa, we're sitting at around about 23% of the total supply, represented by 47 branded hotels. So from a West Africa perspective, total in the pipeline is 84 branded hotels. Basically, the planned hotels that are looking at entering the market are the graph at the bar graph represents the total number of planned hotel rooms. So with Nigeria leading the way, followed by Ghana and Ivory Coast. We've seen a lot of activity in those countries, as well as also in Cape Verde. And in terms of delays, we've seen only 43%. For 43%, there's no change in the delivery, and delays of between 3 and 6 months, around about 23%. Some of the key markets that we're seeing hotels opening in 2020, so around about 719 planned rooms expected to enter the market in West Africa in 2020, and this is represented by 200 keys in Accra, 200 in Bamako, and in Cape Verde. Looking at East Africa, as you mentioned, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. Uganda have seen an upsurge in terms of new development and planned hotels due to the advent of oil, which now seems to be hitting mainstream, and new hotels, jumping on the back of that. And we look at a total of what's expected to enter the market in 2020. There's 1,134 rooms. Some key projects being 254 key hotel in Antananarivo, 231 keys in Dar es Salaam, and 226 keys in Addis. Again, quite a similar picture in terms of plan, in terms of opening and delays. In terms of investor sentiment, or from an owner's operator's perspective, 67% of planned supply is proceeding forward, which is again very encouraging. From a Southern Africa perspective, we've got, in terms of 2020, 679 keys in Johannesburg, which is made up by 2 key projects in Melrose Arch, and another project in Rosebank, and another in Mhlanga. Total of 963 keys, and the total planned supply mainly is focused around South Africa, although Zambia, even though there's been a lot of new supply in Zambia over the last few years, is also seeing an upsurge in terms of expected hotels entering the market. Encouragingly, in this region, that we've seen less an impact, or in terms of COVID, from projects proceeding. The highest percentage terms of reported that 87% of projects that not seeing any impact in terms of how they're proceeding forward. From an opening delay perspective, there's 32% that not expecting any delay in opening, and most, again, the most common is sort of 3 to 6 months, sitting at around 44%. So just some closing remarks from me, looking at our sort of finger on the pulse in terms of just trying to summarize some of the key things from the surveys conducted. The hotel owner sentiment continues to remain positive, which is very encouraging, that owners are looking at a long-term view. Sentiment hasn't changed considerably regarding hospitality investment. Owners are starting to, although they are looking at a wait-and-see approach, I think everybody doesn't know how long the COVID-19 impacts will continue. So most are looking at 3 to 6 months to having a look at what to do, and then we'll re-look at it thereafter. There's still new opportunities that we're seeing, evident on the new signings. Owners are still interested in planning and using this time for planning their hotels and moving forward. We're seeing innovation from the operators in terms of adapting and streamlining their business processes, and also looking at other opportunities on how to realize projects quicker and better. And the development pipeline remains healthy, especially for this year. It's very encouraging to see that those projects still, delays haven't been as significant, and now that business is these projects are continuing to continue as planned. So thank you very much. I think looking at the time, I believe at 2:45 we'll be opening up the sessions, the actual structured networking sessions by country. So please go and have a look at those and see which ones you want to attend. What will be happening there is those will be moderated, as Kirsty mentioned, by different moderators, and there'll be up to 20 people that can contribute at a time, although more people can listen in. So please, let's, the whole idea is for it to be interactive and to hear what's been happening on the ground, and really just to see, if what we're showing in the presentation is actually what's happening. And again, use the time to reconnect and discuss what's going on in each country. And then feel free to network anytime. I think you can network from now on in the speed networking, and you're welcome to pop in and out at any time to meet new people. Thank you very much, and I hopefully, this is the first event that we're trying out virtually, so there might be a few teething problems, so bear with us. But I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get a lot out of it. And from me, thank you very much for listening.